Horse, God of Vengeance? Clearly, CB Zane did not do his research.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
Before I get into this review of the Mighty Mite number 2, I wanted to give everybody an update on the next SJS Direct comic. Now, in 2020, I did the esteemed No Good Deed comic, and in 2022, I did the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, and I have been working on a script for an ISIS comic since 2018, and I'd love to have a comic featuring the goddess next door as my next project. And I've been working on developing a second script for an ISIS comic from the 2013 book Isis the Beauty Myth, and I'm pondering getting ready to do an Isis Bride of Dracula script and hoping to have that script put together sooner rather than later. Now, what I'm trying to do as I'm working on these scripts is I'm also working out logistics as related to the budget, and I'm also working out logistics as related to locations, because I want this comic to really give you a sense of life in New York City. So I've been studying a lot of Google Maps and taking a look at a lot of different locations. So whatever artist I work with has a sense of the city and a sense of locations in the city to bring those areas to life. So that's what I've been doing over the last couple of months as I've been working on trying to get my next comic out, and I'm hoping to have that comic out sooner rather than later. I'm trying to save up the money to do it, and I use a lot of the donations I get to be able to go out here and raise the funds to pay the artist for the covers that I do on SJS Direct books and on SJS Direct comics. So that's all done with donations that I get from you guys. And if you guys want to help me make the next SJS Direct comic, you can drop a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal by clicking the links in the description box. Now, when I got this issue of the Mighty Mite number 2 in my email on Sunday, and I have to say CB Zane did a great job overall on continuing to pick up the momentum from one of the best comics I read back in 2021 or 2022. Mighty Mite is an absolutely fantastic book that really reminds me a lot of Static and Spider-Man, two of the coolest heroes I've ever read, and really does a good job of taking us into the world of Presley, who is just stepping into the world of being a superhero after graduating high school. Now, Presley is getting ready to go to college, and we get a great introduction to her experiences from the previous issue. So this book does a great job of doing something Jim Shooter said to do in making every story an entry point. So what I like here is that we get a nice catch up, because CB Zane knows that it's been a year since people have actually picked up his comic, or 2 years since they've picked up his comic, and this first page really just takes us back and reminds us of everything in a nice little recap of where Jamie was, and really shows us what she had to do as related to the changes in her life of being a superhero and also having to walk away from a boyfriend in order to go to college. And that he does a great job of doing this in less than 2 pages. Great entry point for the new reader who's never read a Mighty Mite book, and then takes us into the 3rd page, which shows us what Jamie's doing right now at Olympus University, a university that is more than a school, but I don't want to give away too much as related to that, because there's a lot that goes on here in this story. So we get Presley out here with her friend, and she's on a roommate and trying to just let them know why she wasn't in her room. And what happens is that she was actually out on patrol. And as she's out on patrol, we find out that these criminals who are at the museum are taking a little bit of this cue that gave the Mite her powers and kind of using it in the way that Bane goes out here and uses venom, and the way some guys like to snort coke. So this leads to a nice sequence of action where they're going to try to take this crown, but the Mite is there to go out here and thinks it's a good time to Mite jump in, and jumps in and protects a security guard. I like this sequence, exceptionally well done as related to setting up this whole sequence as related to the mystery regarding the Q. And exceptionally, again, well done, good sequencing, good pacing, and good panel work here. Just exceptionally well done. And really the art just pops right here. And we get a nice little twist. I'm not going to give that twist away as related to the Q, because I want you to go out here and head over to, if CB Zane has a website, and go check that out for yourself. Now, the book goes on, and I don't want to give away too much of this book because CB Zane worked hard on it. Him and the team worked hard on this book. So I don't want to give away too much of their work as related to this book. And we get some nice sequences about the university and that it's more than meets the eye. But my main issue comes with later on in the book as related to this whole concept of this whole Horus character. Now, they have an Indian professor studying some Egyptian artifacts, and as he's studying the Egyptian artifacts, he's talking about the Eye of Horus, and this is where I start to have an issue with this book, because this is where CB Zane made a mistake and really didn't do his research. Now, he has Horus as a bad guy, but as somebody who has done stories about the Heliopolitan gods and has the Heliopolitan gods as the foundation for one of his characters, and done years of research on the Heliopolitan gods, I can tell you that Horus is not a bad guy. No, Horus, the son of Osiris, is not a bad guy. And this is where I got a little bit of a beef with CB Zane. He's got Horus talking about he's the god of vengeance, and the falcon who flies over the skies of Heliopolis is not a god of vengeance. So this is where CB Zane really didn't do his research on the Egyptian or the Heliopolitan gods, and it really makes a really great book start to fall apart as related to its structure. Now, he should have, again, taken some time to do some research to develop a proper antagonist, because this whole Horus thing really doesn't work, because when you're doing heroines, you really don't want to give them opponents like this, because opponents like this basically fall into the trope that really does damage to books featuring heroines, where they take on these jobbers, and these jobbers really don't help the book really actualize its potential. Now, when I'm out here writing heroines, I understand one thing, and that's that heroines, you have to focus more on relationships, because women are social, and a story that features heroines needs to focus on the relationships between the heroine and her antagonist. That's something I do in the Isis series. Oftentimes when I'm doing the stories featuring the goddess next door, I'm always focusing on the relationship that Isis has with her bad guys, like Amari, who was jealous of Isis getting more attention than she did in ancient Nubia, and that was the foundation for the story Amari's Revenge. And for stories like Isis, the beauty myth, I focused on the Rahima character basically wanting to covet Isis's beauty and wanting to learn her so-called beauty secrets. And I also, when I was doing stories like The Ultimate Fight, I had the Nemesis character, who was one of the Greek gods, basically wanting to go out here and wanting to prove that she could be a much better fighter, because I understand women oftentimes compete like this. So you have to understand how women behave and how women operate, because it's very different from men. Because if you understand how women behave, you can make a more compelling story that will really draw the reader in. And when you're writing heroines, again, it's always about the relationship that the woman has with her antagonist that will be the thing that drives the story, because the antagonist will drive the conflict, and the relationship between the two as they feud will be the thing that really draws the reader in. That's something I also put in other stories like Isis, All That Glitters, where Isis is feeling bad about being outshined by Golden Shine after she participates in the bank robbery, and Isis is unable to stop her. And in stories like Samurai Goddess, I present the side of her being a friend to a young woman who was being attacked in a gym. So I really want to focus on those interpersonal relationships between a heroine and the people she interacts with, and that's what CB Zane really needs to focus on if he really wants his book to really catch on, because Presley is a very interesting character. She has a great supporting cast, but I think that the weak spot here with this whole Horus God of Vengeance thing is showing me that he's not really focusing on the antagonist with the same energy as the protagonist. And that's one of the things you have to do when you're a writer, is you have to focus on the antagonist just like you would the protagonist, and you have to focus on making the bad guy just as interesting as the heroine. So that's one of the things I always do when I'm writing stories in the ISIS or even the Esteem series. I'm always focused on trying to make it all about the relationships between the characters and the people in their lives, because that's really going to draw a lot of readers in when it comes to heroines. It just can't be about how good looking the heroine is. She has to have some substance behind it, and what will really get your readers into your story is seeing this heroine really just being social and being friendly and being approachable. That's something I do in my stories with The Goddess Next Door and Hell's Aspiring Angel. I try to make them stories where you see a person and you're getting to know a person, and you're seeing her having different relationships with different people. And that's how you make a very compelling story with a heroine, is you really got to focus on the relationships. With heroes, it's different, because it's always about a guy looking to beat another guy, and it's always about that kind of competition. But with heroines, again, you got to focus on the relationships, because it's the relationships that draw readers in and want them to pick up the story. Now, this story with the Mite concludes on a bit of a cliffhanger I got an issue with, and that issue is they want to use this cliffhanger to introduce another character, and I wasn't a fan of this at all. No, I wasn't really that much of a fan of this at all. I mean, if I'm reading a Mite book, I don't want to be pushed into trying to buy another comic, especially when these crowdfunded comics are very expensive. I mean, this Mite book, I think I spent about $7 on it, and that's very expensive for me. And then they tell me in order to see the story continue, I gotta go out here and pick up a Scarlet Steel book, and I'm not really a fan of that type of sales approach, because it really, while it may work in the comic shop back in the day, when it comes to indies, if you want to do something, you really don't want to push me into another character. What you want to do is go out here and make it where I can pick up Mite number 3, so I can feel like I have an incentive to pick up that book. So pushing this book in front of me doesn't give me incentive to pick up Mite number 3, so I had an issue with that overall. And again, I don't really like that type of ambush marketing. It just doesn't work for me. But what worked for me was the second story, Date Night, which really reminded me a lot of manga. I mean, this second story, I really wanted to take everybody just to take a quick look at the art shortly, because this second story is, again, exceptionally well done. And this is the type of story I really want to see more of in Mite, because Mite really works well when it's all about the friends and the social relationships. That's what really makes this book strong. And the second story, Date Night, is exceptionally well done. It really reminds me a lot of manga, and it really reminds me a lot of what is so much fun about manga. Now, overall, this entire second issue of the Mighty Mite is a really solid second issue as related to most of the story, but the only issue I had was the whole presentation of Horus. He really doesn't really stand as a really solid bad guy. He doesn't really add to the organic relationships that Presley is having with people. I really wanted to see a more organic antagonist who was woven into the story and really is somebody who could possibly be a rival to Presley. I mean, I believe C.B. Zane sold himself a little short with this jobber of Horus. I believe he really should have taken a minute to really focus on developing a villain who would be having more of a relationship with Presley. I think that would have added for a bit more conflict. And whenever I'm writing Isis and Esteem stories, I'm always thinking about the relationship that Isis and Esteem have with the villains, because that's really important, and it really allows for the reader to be drawn in on several reasons. One, it allows them to see that they're in a world of people and have connections with people. Two, it really allows the reader to really get to know this character as they have relationships with other people. And three, really gets us to come into the world of these characters. So when I saw this Horus character, he just came across as detached and a little not connected to anything, and that really threw off the entire flow of what was a truly great comic. And you really got to think about that when you're doing characters. You have to think about how those characters work when they interact with each other. So Mighty Mite number 2 was a very solid comic. It's not one of the best books of 2023. It's got some flaws, but it's a really solid comic, and you'll be glad to have picked this book up. And I'm gonna pick up the Scarlet Steel number 1. I'm not happy to do that. I really would like to have seen some build for Mighty Mite number 3, and I really wanted to have that enthusiasm for Mighty Mite number 3. But the ambush pitch for Scarlet Steel just turned me off, and I'm still gonna pick these books up because they're well done. But I'm just have a sour taste about the ambush marketing towards the end. So if you guys want to pick up my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic on Lulu.com right now in paperback. And if you want to pick up my first Esteem comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents right now in digital format. And you can also pick up Esteem No Good Deed in paperback format in the Esteem book, Esteem Blast from the Past, which is available in paperback on Amazon.com, along with the stories of the Goddess Next Door in the Isis series, which is based on Egyptian or Heliopolitan mythology. You can find all of those books in the Isis, Esteem, and John Hayes series on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to help me be able to make my next full SJS Direct Universe comic, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And I also use some of that money to also go out here and pick up great independent comics like the Mighty Mite and review them on my channel. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The Goddess Next Door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.